They say the old castle never sleeps, that even the stones remember the night she walked through those iron gates with nothing but a blade and a desperate prayer. Some swear they heard thunder crack the sky in two. Others claim the moon turned crimson, just for a moment, as if heaven itself held its breath. But no one speaks of what happened inside. No one dares to say his name aloud anymore, because what began that night wasn't war, wasn't conquest. It was something far older, far more dangerous. It was a bond written in blood, sworn under shadow, and sealed with a word that would reshape the fate of two worlds. The truth? It didn't start with love. It started with sacrifice. The castle loomed against the sky like a wound that refused to heal, all blackened stone and shattered towers, wrapped in fog, so thick it seemed to breathe. Elena stood at the gate, her fingers trembling around the hilt of her father's dagger. The only thing she had left of him. The only thing she had left of anything. Behind her, the village was dying, slow, painful, drained one life at a time, like a body losing blood drop by drop. The elders had tried everything. Prayers, wards, offerings left at crossroads under moonlight. Nothing worked. The creatures that came in the night didn't care about tradition. They didn't negotiate. They took, and they would keep taking until there was nothing left. So Elena made a choice. She would go to the source. She would face the one they whispered about in terror, the one whose name had become a curse, a myth, a nightmare passed down through generations. The Vampire King, the Lord of the Endless Night, the monster who ruled from a throne built on bones and broken promises. The gate groaned open before she could even touch it, as if the castle itself had been expecting her. The sound echoed through the courtyard, and she stepped inside, swallowing the fear that clawed up her throat. Torches flickered to life along the walls, not by hand, but by something unseen, something watching. Her footsteps rang out against stone floors polished smooth by centuries. Tapestries hung from the walls, faded and moth-eaten, depicting battles she didn't recognize, winged figures falling from the sky, cities burning, rivers running red. She forced herself not to look too closely. The throne room stretched out before her like the mouth of some vast, waiting beast. Columns rose high into shadow, carved with symbols that seemed to twist and shift in the corner of her vision. And at the far end, elevated on a platform of black marble, sat the throne. And him. He didn't move when she entered, didn't speak. He simply watched, his presence filling the room like cold water rising, slow and suffocating. He was draped in black, his hair the color of midnight, his skin pale as frost. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, endless, ancient, eyes that had seen empires rise and crumble, that had watched the world turn 1,000 times and felt nothing. Until now. "You came alone," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, tinged with something that almost sounded like curiosity. Elena lifted her chin, fighting the instinct to run. "I came to bargain." A faint smile touched his lips, not cruel, but not kind either. Something in between. Something dangerous. Bargain. How human. He rose from the throne, descending the steps with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, each movement deliberate, controlled. "And what do you offer me, little one? What could you possibly have that I would want?" She had rehearsed this, practiced the words 100 times in the dark before dawn. But standing here, with his gaze fixed on her like a predator sizing a prey, the words fell hollow, fragile. "My life," she said, "in exchange for theirs. Spare my village. Stop the killing. And I'll stay. I'll serve. I'll do whatever you ask." He stopped a few feet away, studying her. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until she thought she might break under the weight of it. "Your life." He tilted his head slightly. "One mortal life, in exchange for a village full of them. You think yourself so valuable. I think." Her voice cracked, and she steadied it. "I think you're bored. I think you had 1,000 servants, 1,000 prisoners. But no one's ever walked in here and offered themselves willingly. No one's ever chosen this." His eyes flashed, something sharp and sudden, like lightning behind storm clouds. He moved closer, and she felt the temperature drop, felt the air thicken. He reached out, and she forced herself not to flinch as his cold fingers tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. Interesting, he murmured, but insufficient. Her heart sank. However, he released her chin, stepping back. There's something I want, something no one has been able to give me. Elena swallowed. What? He turned away, moving toward the window where moonlight spilled across the floor in pale, silver streams. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stood there, silhouetted against the night. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, heavier. I have lived for centuries. I have conquered kingdoms. I have bent the world to my will. He paused. But I am the last of my kind, the last of the true bloodline. When I fall, there will be nothing, no legacy, no heir, no continuation. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. You want. She couldn't finish the sentence. He turned to face her, and in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not cruelty, not hunger, loneliness. I want a child, he said simply. An heir. Someone to carry forward what I have built. Someone to ensure that when I am gone, I am not forgotten. Elena's breath caught. But I'm human. I know what I am. His voice was sharp now, cutting. I know what you are, but there are ways, old ways, magic that was written when the world was young. He moved closer again, and this time she did step back, her shoulders hitting the cold stone wall. Blood and shadow, life and death, a union that should not exist but can. You're insane, she whispered. Perhaps. He didn't deny it. But you came here seeking salvation for your people. This is my price. Bear me a child. Give me an heir. And I will spare your village. I will withdraw my forces. I will let them live in peace. And if I refuse? The smile that curved his lips was slow, deliberate. Then we continue as we have been, one by one, until there is nothing left but ghosts and graves. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But she thought of her sister's children, of the old woman who had taught her to weave, of the boy who brought her wildflowers every spring. She thought of home. How? Her voice was barely a whisper. How would it even work? He extended his hand, palm up. Give me your hand. She hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. His skin was cold, impossibly cold, but his grip was gentle. He drew a thin blade from his belt, so fast she almost didn't see it, and before she could react, he pressed it to her palm. The pain was sharp, sudden. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin. He stared at it, not with hunger, not with disgust, with reverence. Your blood carries life, he said softly. Mine carries eternity. Together, he looked up, meeting her eyes. Together, they could create something the world has never seen. Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to pull away, wanted to tell him he was mad, that this was impossible, that she would never. But then she thought of the children, the dying, the screaming in the night. If I agree, she forced the words out. If I do this, you swear? You swear they'll be safe. I swear it. His voice rang out, clear and certain, echoing through the vast chamber. On my name, on my blood, on everything I am, I will protect your village as if it were my own. She closed her eyes, took a breath that felt like her last. Then I agree. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. He raised her bleeding palm to his lips, not to drink, but to seal the vow. His lips brushed against her skin, cold and soft, and she felt something shift, something deeper than flesh, deeper than bone, a thread connecting them, invisible but unbreakable. When he pulled back, his eyes had changed, darker, deeper. You are mine now, he said, not a threat, a fact. And Elena realized with a cold clarity that settled into her bones that she had just changed the fate of the world. She just didn't know how yet. The room they gave her was nothing like a prison. It was vast, draped in deep crimson and black, with a four-poster bed carved from dark, with that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Candles burned in silver holders, their flames never flickering, never dying. A fire crackled in the hearth, though she never saw anyone tend it. The windows overlooked a garden she hadn't noticed from outside, wild roses growing in impossible profusion, their petals the color of dry blood. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her bandaged hand resting in her lap, and tried to make sense of what she'd done. She'd made a deal with a monster. She'd agreed to bear his child. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running for the door, consequences be damned. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw her sister's face, heard the children laughing, remembered what home felt like before the darkness came. This was the price, and she would pay it. A soft knock broke her thoughts. The door opened before she could respond, and a woman entered, or something that had once been a woman. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, with silver hair that fell like water and eyes the color of amber. She moved with the same unnatural grace as him, and Elena knew immediately what she was. "My name is Seraphine," the woman said, her voice like wind through empty halls. "I've been instructed to attend to you, to ensure you have everything you need." "I need to go home," Elena said flatly. Seraphine's expression didn't change. "That is the one thing I cannot give you." She moved to the wardrobe, opening it to reveal gowns Elena had never seen before, silk and velvet in shades of midnight and wine. "You will dine with the king tonight. You should prepare." "I'm not hungry." It was a suggestion. Elena wanted to argue, but something in Seraphine's eyes warned her against it. This woman, this creature, served the vampire king with absolute loyalty. Defying her would be pointless. So she let Seraphine dress her in a gown of deep burgundy that fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Let her brush out her hair and pin it back with silver combs. Let her apply a touch of color to her lips, her cheeks, until she looked like someone else entirely, someone who belonged here. When Seraphine finally stepped back, satisfied, Elena barely recognized her own reflection. "He's waiting," Seraphine said. The dining hall was smaller than the throne room, but no less imposing. A long table stretched down the center, set with fine china and crystal glasses that caught the candlelight like trapped stars. And at the head of the table, he sat, the vampire king. He rose when she entered, a gesture that surprised her. Elena, her name on his lips, sounded different, softer, almost human. She didn't respond, just moved to the chair Seraphine pulled out for her, not at the opposite end of the table, but close, too close, near enough that she could see the sharp lines of his face, the way shadows pooled in the hollows of his throat. Servants appeared, pale, silent figures who moved like ghosts, placing dishes before them. The food looked exquisite. Roasted meat, glazed vegetables, fresh bread that steamed when broken. Her stomach twisted with hunger she'd been ignoring for days. She didn't touch it. "You should eat," he said, his voice low. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" The question came out sharper than she intended. His eyes flicked to hers. "For what comes next?" A chill ran down her spine, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "And what exactly does come next? You haven't told me anything. How is this supposed to work? This ritual or spell or whatever it is?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he set down his glass, filled with something dark that definitely wasn't wine. "It's not a simple process. The magic required is ancient, dangerous. It will bind us in ways that go beyond flesh. Bind us how? Our lives will be connected. What harms one will affect the other. What one feels, the other will sense." He leaned back, studying her. "It's the only way to create life from death. Balance must be maintained." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "So I'll be connected to you forever, until the child is born. After that," he trailed off, "after that, the bond will weaken. You'll be free." "Will I?" She didn't believe him. Couldn't. His jaw tightened. "I am many things, Elena, but I am not a liar. I gave you my word. When this is done, when my heir exists, you may return to your village. You will be under my protection for the rest of your days, but you will be free." She wanted to believe him. God help her, part of her almost did. "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why does it have to be me? You could have anyone. You could compel someone, use your power or force. I could, he interrupted, his voice cold. But it wouldn't work. The magic requires willing participation. Coercion breaks the bond. The child would not survive. His eyes softened just slightly. You chose to come here. You chose to offer yourself. That choice is what makes this possible. Elena looked away, unable to hold his gaze any longer. When does it start? Tonight. Her breath caught. There's a chamber, he continued, rising from his seat, deep beneath the castle. A place where the veil between worlds is thin, where old magic still lingers. He extended his hand to her. Come, I'll show you. She didn't want to take his hand, didn't want to follow him into the depths of this cursed place, but she thought of the promise. The village, the lives depending on her. She placed her hand in his. The descent was long, winding down spiral stairs carved from stone that grew damper, colder, the further they went. Torches lit themselves as they passed, then extinguished in their wake, as if the castle itself was breathing. Elena's heart pounded with each step, but she didn't pull away. Finally, they reached the door, massive, iron-bound, covered in symbols that seemed to ride in the flickering light. He placed his palm against it, and it swung open. The chamber beyond took her breath away. It was circular, the walls lined with ancient carvings depicting scenes of creation and destruction, of gods and monsters, of unions that should never have been. In the center stood a raised platform, encircled by candles that burned with silver flame. The air thrummed with power, thick and electric, making her skin prickle. This is where it begins, he said, his voice echoing strangely in the space. The ritual will forge the bond between us. It will not be painless. Elena swallowed hard. What do I have to do? He led her to the platform, and she noticed for the first time the shallow bowl carved into stone. We mingle our blood, he explained. We speak the words of binding. And we... He hesitated. We what? His eyes met hers, and in them she saw something she hadn't expected. Uncertainty. We consummate the bond. Not as humans do, as magic demands. Blood to blood, life to death, shadow to light. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she forced herself not to look away. I understand. He studied her face for a long moment. You're afraid. Of course I'm afraid. Her voice shook slightly. But I'm here. I'm not running. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or something deeper. Then we begin. He drew the same blade from before, slicing his palm without hesitation. Dark blood welled up, almost black in the silver light. Then he looked at her, waiting. She unwrapped the bandage from her own hand, the cut from earlier still fresh. She held her palm over the bowl, and he did the same. Their blood mixed, swirling together in patterns that seemed impossible, defying gravity, defying nature. The temperature dropped. The candles flared higher. He began to speak in a language she didn't recognize. Old, ancient, the words scraping against reality itself. She felt the power rising, felt it wrap around them like chains made of starlight and shadow. Then he pulled her close, his bloodied hand gripping hers, and she gasped as the bond snapped into place. It was like being struck by lightning. She felt him, his centuries of loneliness, his hunger, his iron control barely containing something wild and desperate beneath. She felt his memories flash through her mind, too fast to grasp, images of battles and blood and endless, endless night. And he felt her fear, her determination, her love for the people she'd left behind, her stubborn refusal to break. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, she saw him as something other than a monster. She saw him as a being carrying the weight of eternity. Alone, always alone. Elena, he breathed, and her name sounded like a prayer. The ritual demanded more. And as he drew her down onto the platform, as the magic surged around them like a storm, as their blood sang with power older than time itself, she realized the most terrifying truth of all. She didn't hate him, and that was more dangerous than anything else in this cursed place. Elena woke to silence, not the peaceful kind, the heavy, watchful kind that pressed against her skin like a physical weight. She was back in her chamber, the fire still burning in the hearth, But something had fundamentally changed. The world felt different. She felt different. The bond. She could sense him, not his location exactly, but his presence, like a dark star at the edge of her awareness, constant and unavoidable. She felt his mood, cold and contemplative, felt the ancient weariness that lived in his bones. Her hand moved to her stomach instinctively, though she knew it was too soon. Nothing had taken root yet, but the magic had been real. She felt it burn through her veins like liquid fire, felt something shift deep inside, felt her mortality brush against his immortality, and somehow, impossibly, not shatter. A knock at the door. Seraphine entered with a tray, tea and fresh bread, steam rising in delicate curls. "You should eat," the vampire woman said, setting it down. Her amber eyes studied Elena with something that might have been curiosity. "The ritual takes a toll. You'll need strength." "How long was I asleep?" 2 days. Elena's eyes widened. 2. The magic required rest. Your body needed time to adjust. Seraphine moved the window, pulling back the heavy curtains. Moonlight spilled in. Always moonlight here, never sun. "He's been watching over you. He hasn't left the castle. Why would he leave?" Seraphine's smile was sharp. "The king doesn't stay in one place. He has territories to oversee, blood debts to collect, a kingdom that spans further than you can imagine." She turned back to Elena. "But since you arrived, he's remained here, waiting. He feels the bond too, you know, more strongly than you do. It's unsettling him." Elena picked up the tea, if only to have something to do with her hands. "I can feel him, just barely, like a shadow at the corner of my vision. It will grow stronger, especially if—" Seraphine trailed off meaningfully. "If I'm pregnant." The word felt strange in her mouth. Surreal. She was discussing pregnancy with a vampire in a castle that shouldn't exist, carrying a child that would be half human, half monster. Her life had become a nightmare. Or a fairy tale. She wasn't sure which was worse. "The bond will intensify," Seraphine confirmed. "You'll feel everything he feels. And he'll feel everything you do. Pain, fear, joy." She paused. "Love." "There is no love here," Elena said flatly. Seraphine's knowing smile suggested otherwise. "If you say so." That evening, Elena found herself drawn to the garden. It shouldn't have existed. A garden this lush, this alive, in a place so steeped in death. But magic, she was learning, didn't care about should or shouldn't. The roses bloomed in impossible colors, their scent heavy and sweet. A fountain burbled somewhere in the darkness, water flowing over stone worn smooth by time. She wandered the paths, her bare feet silent on cool grass that shouldn't grow without sunlight. The stars above were brighter here, sharper, as if the veil between earth and heaven had worn thin. "You shouldn't be out here alone." His voice came from the shadows, and she spun to find him leaning against a stone pillar, half hidden in darkness. He looked different somehow, less armored. His coat was unbuttoned, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. Human gestures, human anxieties. "Why not?" She lifted her chin. "Are there monsters in your garden?" "Yes." He stepped into the moonlight. "Me." The simple honesty of it caught her off guard. "You're afraid," he said, and it wasn't a question. She felt his awareness of her fear through the bond, warm and fluttering in her chest. "Yes." "Of me, or of what happening?" "Both." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I can feel you, all the time. It's like you're under my skin." "I know." His voice was rough. "I feel you too. Your fear, your homesickness, your—" He stopped. "My what?" He was silent for a long moment. "Then, your strength. I didn't expect it. Most mortals would have broken by now." "I'm not most mortals." A ghost of a smile. "No, you're not." They stood there in the garden, the bond humming between them, and Elena realized this was the first real conversation they'd had. Not bargains or rituals or magic. Just talking. "Why did you really want a child?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "It can't just be about legacy. You have power, territory. You could live forever. His expression closed off. Forever is a long time to be alone. The raw honesty of it struck her like a blow. I've watched civilizations rise and fall, he continued, his voice low. I've seen beauty and horror in equal measure. I've held power that could reshape the world. He looked at her, and his eyes were ancient, tired. But at the end of every night, I return to silence, to emptiness, to the knowledge that I am the last. That when I finally fall to whatever can kill me, there will be nothing, no one to remember, no one to carry forward even a fraction of what I was. Elena's throat tightened. So you want a child to not be alone? I want a child to prove that something of me can create rather than destroy, that I'm capable of more than taking life. His jaw clenched, that I'm not entirely a monster. The vulnerability in his voice shook something loose inside her. She took a step closer, watching him carefully. What's your name? He blinked, surprised. What? Your name. Everyone calls you the Vampire King, but that's not a name. That's a title. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly she almost missed it. Kieran, she repeated, and watched something shift in his expression, as if hearing his name from her lips had broken something open. No one has called me that in 300 years. Then they should have. She met his gaze steadily. You want to be more than a monster? Start by being a person. For a moment, she thought he might be angry, might lash out at her presumption. Instead, he laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he'd forgotten how. But it was real. You are... He shook his head, almost wonderingly. You are not at all what I expected. Good. She felt a small, dangerous warmth in her chest. Because I didn't expect any of this either. But here we are, he echoed. The bond pulsed between them, and Elena felt something new flowing through it. Not fear, not anger, understanding. I should return inside, she said finally, though part of her didn't want to. Yes. But he didn't move. Elena? She paused. Thank you for trying to see me as something other than what I am. She looked back at him, this ancient creature who commanded darkness, who had lived longer than empires, who had somehow become something other than just her captor. Maybe you're more than you think you are, Kieran. And she left him standing in the garden, surrounded by impossible roses, looking more human than he had any right to be. 3 weeks passed. Elena learned the rhythms of the castle, the servants who moved like ghosts, the vast library filled with books in languages dead and living, the observatory where Kieran watched the stars with an expression that bordered on longing. She learned that he didn't sleep, that he spent his nights reading or walking the halls like a restless spirit. She learned that he was brilliant, savage, occasionally funny in a dark, cutting way, and she learned that the bond was growing stronger. She felt when he was troubled, felt when he was hungry, the thirst that lived in him like a constant ache, felt when he fought it, resisted it, controlled it with iron will because she was near, and he felt her fears and hopes, felt when she cried at night for her family, felt when she found small joys in a book or a song. They began to spend time together, not because the ritual demanded it, but because the bond made separation uncomfortable, like a limb falling asleep. They would sit in the library, reading in silence, or walk the gardens, discussing philosophy and magic and the nature of existence. And slowly, carefully, something shifted. On the night of the full moon, Elena woke with a certainty that went bone deep. The ritual had worked. She was carrying his child. She didn't need a test or a confirmation. She felt it through the bond, felt the tiny spark of life taking root inside her, felt Kieran's awareness flare bright and sharp across the castle. He appeared at her door within moments, still dressed, his eyes wild. You feel it, he said. Yes. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees before her, his hands hovering near her stomach but not quite touching. May I? She nodded, throat tight, his palm pressed against her abdomen, cold through the thin fabric of her nightgown. And through the bond, she felt his wonder, his disbelief, his fierce, sudden protectiveness. It's real, he breathed. It's actually real, she finished. When he looked up at her, his eyes were bright with something that looked dangerously close to tears. If vampires could cry. Thank you, he whispered. And Elena, her hand moving to cover his, realized a dawning horror and wonder that somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without wanting to, she'd started to care about him. The child grew faster than any human pregnancy. Seraphine explained it was a magic, half mortal, half immortal. The baby existed between worlds and followed rules of neither. Elena's body changed rapidly, her stomach rounding within weeks instead of months, the bond with Kieran intensifying until she could feel his heartbeat as clearly as her own. Except he didn't have a heartbeat. She felt the stillness where it should be, the cold absence that marked him as undead. But she also felt something else, something that pulsed in rhythm with the child growing inside her, as if the baby was becoming a bridge between them, between life and death, a living contradiction that somehow made perfect, impossible sense. Kieran became impossibly protective. He barely left her side, attending to her with a care that bordered on obsessive. He had the finest healers brought in, some human, some not, to monitor her health. Ancient physicians who spoke in tongues older than Latin, midwives who had delivered impossible children before, creatures caught between species, between worlds. He ensured she ate the finest foods, rested in the softest linens, wanted for nothing, and through the bond she felt his constant, thrumming fear. He was terrified of losing her. The realization struck her one morning as she woke to find him standing by the window, silhouetted against the eternal moonlight, his shoulders rigid with tension. She could feel his thoughts through the bond, fragmented, desperate, images of her pale and still, of blood-staining white sheets, of holding a child while burying its mother. "Kieran," she said softly. He turned, and the naked fear in his eyes nearly broke her. "I'm not going to die," she told him, pushing herself up against the pillows. The movement was harder now, her body heavy with the growing child. "I can feel it. The baby is strong. I'm strong. You can't know that." His voice was tight, each word carefully controlled. Childbirth is dangerous even for humans. For this, he gestured helplessly at her swollen stomach, his hand trembling slightly. "We don't know what will happen. We're in uncharted territory. There are no precedents, no records of a union like ours producing a living child. Then we face it together." She extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he crossed the room and took it, sinking onto the edge of the bed. His skin was cold as always, but his grip was gentle, reverent. That's what the bond means, isn't it? His fingers tightened around hers. "I didn't expect this." "What?" "To care." He looked at her, and his eyes were raw, stripped of all the armor he'd worn for centuries. "I thought I was incapable of it. Thought that part of me died centuries ago, buried under layers of blood and darkness and endless, endless time. But you—" He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "You made me feel again, and I don't know if I should thank you or curse you for it." Elena's breath caught. "Kieran, I know what you are to me," he interrupted, his voice breaking slightly. "I know what this is, and I know I have no right to it. You made a bargain to save your people. You didn't ask for any of this, not the bond, not the feelings, not the complications. Once the child is born, you'll be free. That was our agreement. I gave you my word. And if I don't want to be free?" The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and impossible. The bond pulsed with the weight of them, carrying her sincerity, her confusion, her own tangled emotions. His eyes widened. "Elena, I'm not saying I love you," she said quickly, needing him to understand. "I don't know what I feel. This bond makes everything confused. I can't tell where you end, and I begin sometimes. But I know I don't hate you. I know that when I think about leaving, about going back to my village and never seeing you again—" She swallowed hard. "It feels wrong, like tearing away a part of myself. The bond is part of it. I know." She leaned closer, her free hand moving to his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. He went very still under her touch, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. But not all of it. You're not the monster you think you are, Kieran. You're lonely, broken, ancient and terrifying, and sometimes cruel, yes. But you're also brilliant and funny and capable of more tenderness than you believe possible. I've killed thousands, he said hoarsely, his eyes searching hers as if looking for the disgust he expected to find. I've destroyed villages like yours without thought, without mercy. I've committed atrocities that would make you sick. I've watched people burn and felt nothing. I know what you've done. I'm not blind to it. She held his gaze steadily. But I also know what you're capable of becoming. What you already are becoming. The child is changing you. I'm changing you. Every day. I feel it through the bond. The softening, the opening, the slow thaw of something frozen for too long. What if I can't change enough? The question came out raw, vulnerable. What if the darkness in me is too deep? What if I hurt you? Hurt the child? What if you already have changed? She cupped his face with both hands now, forcing him to meet her eyes. What if the man sitting here, terrified of losing me, worried about being a good father, is already so far from the monster you think you are that you can't even see it? He stared at her, and through the bond, she felt his walls crumbling, felt the desperate hope he'd been trying to bury, the love he was terrified to name, the longing for something he convinced himself he didn't deserve. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not. She smiled slightly, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. But you have me anyway. He kissed her then, not with the cold calculation of the ritual, not with the hunger of a vampire, but with warmth, with longing, with something that felt dangerously close to devotion. His hands moved her face, cradling it like she was something precious, something breakable. And Elena kissed him back, tasting the impossibility of them, the wrongness that had somehow become right. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless despite his lack of breath, she rested her forehead against his. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Promise me, he said, his voice barely audible. Promise me you'll fight to survive, that you won't give up. I promise. She placed his hand on her stomach, where the baby moved, a flutter like wings. We both promise. The weeks that followed were strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Elena's body continued to change at an unnatural pace. The healers came daily, monitoring her with instruments both medical and magical. Seraphine took to sleeping in an adjacent chamber, ready to assist at any moment. And Kieran became a constant shadow, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. He read to her in the evenings, ancient texts and modern novels alike, his voice a low rumble that soothed the aches in her changing body. He brought her gift from the world beyond the castle walls. Flowers that bloomed at midnight, books written in languages she was learning, a music box that played haunting melodies without winding. And he talked, after centuries of silence. He talked. He told her about his human life, the fragments he still remembered, a village by the sea, a mother who sang while she worked, a father who taught him to fish. Simple memories, faded with time, but precious for their rarity. He told her about his turning, the vampire who had made him, a beautiful, terrible woman named Morgana, who had seen potential in a dying soldier and decided to grant maternity. How he'd hated her at first, then loved her, then watched her walk into the sun one day, tired of existence. He told her about the centuries that followed, the wars he'd fought, the kingdoms he'd built and destroyed, the slow realization that power meant nothing without purpose, that eternity was just another word for loneliness. I wanted to end at once, he admitted one night, his hand resting on her stomach, feeling the baby move. Wanted to walk into the dawn and let the sun turn me to ash. What stopped you? Cowardice, at first. His smile was bitter. Then curiosity. The world kept changing. Technology, art, music, ideas. I wanted to see what came next. And then I realized I was waiting. For what? For you. He looked at her, his eyes serious. I didn't know it then, but I was waiting for someone to remind me what it felt like to be alive. Elena's throat tightened. That's a lot of pressure. You handle it well. His lips quirked. You handle everything well. Most humans would have broken by now. I'm not most humans. No. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You're something far more extraordinary. The pain started on a night when the moon was dark. Elena woke with a gasp, her hand flying to her stomach as cramping tore through her. It felt like her body was splitting open, like something inside was trying to break free. The bond flared bright with panic, and Kieran materialized at her side. Within seconds, his eyes wild. It's time, she managed through gritted teeth. His face went pale, paler than usual, if that was possible. It's too soon. We need. Now, Kieran, the baby is coming now. Another contraction hit, and she cried out. Through the bond, she felt his terror spike, felt his control fracture. Chaos erupted. Seraphine appeared with the healers, moving with supernatural speed. They lifted Elena carefully, carrying her through corridors that blurred together until they reached a chamber deep in the castle, one prepared specifically for this moment. Candles burned with protective wards, their flames silver and gold. Herbs and ancient medicines lined the shelves, some familiar, others that smelled of magic and impossibility. And Kieran refused to leave, holding her hand as the contractions intensified, his other hand gripping the edge of the bed hard enough to crack the wood. You should go. Elena gasped between waves of pain. Never. You don't need to see this. I'm staying. His voice was iron, but his hand trembled. I'm not leaving you. Not for a second. Through the bond, she felt his terror, felt him bargaining with forces beyond comprehension, offering anything, his power, his immortality, his very existence, if it meant she would survive. She felt prayers tumbling through his mind, directed at gods he didn't believe in, at the universe itself. Please, please, I'll give anything. Just let her live. The pain built to an unbearable crescendo. Elena screamed, her vision whiting out, her body arching off the bed. The healers worked around her, chanting in old tongues, their hands glowing with magic. Seraphine pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, murmuring reassurances. And Kieran held her hand, his grip the only anchor in a sea of agony. Stay with me, he begged, his voice breaking. Elena, stay with me. Don't you dare leave. Don't you dare. And then, a cry, sharp, piercing, alive. The sound cut through everything else, the pain, the fear, the chaos. Elena's breath caught, her head lifting weakly as the healers moved quickly. She saw them lift a tiny, bloody form from between her legs. A baby, her baby, their baby. A girl, Seraphine said, her voice thick with wonder, tears streaming down her face. You have a daughter. Kieran made a sound that might have been a sob, his free hand covering his mouth as if to hold an emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Elena reached for the child with trembling arms, and the healers placed her there, warm and wailing and absolutely, impossibly perfect. She had Kieran's dark hair, thick for a newborn, Elena's nose, small and delicate, and when she opened her eyes, they were a color neither of them possessed. Silver, like starlight trapped in mortal form. She's... Kieran's voice broke completely. Tears he shouldn't be able to cry streaming down his face. She's beautiful. Elena looked up at him, at this ancient vampire who had lived for centuries and never known love, who was now staring at his daughter with absolute awe and terror and devotion. What should we name her? She whispered. Luna, he said immediately, as if the name had been waiting his entire existence to be spoken. For the moon that gave us light in the darkness. For the impossible beauty that exists in the night. Luna, Elena repeated, and the baby quieted as if recognizing her name, her tiny silver eyes fixing on her mother's face. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's overwhelming love, his gratitude, so profound it felt like worship, his disbelief that he could create something so pure, so untainted by his darkness, and his absolute terror that he would fail them both. You won't fail her, Elena said softly, reading his thoughts through the bond. You won't fail us. How can you know? Because I feel what you feel, and what you feel for her. She looked down at Luna, then back at him. No one who loves as deeply could possibly fail. He sank to his knees beside the bed, one hand on Elena, one hand gently touching Luna's tiny fist. The baby's fingers wrapped around his finger with surprising strength, and he made another broken sound. "I swear," he whispered, his voice fierce and reverent all at once. "I swear on everything I am, on all the power I possess, on the very fabric of existence itself. I will protect you both. I will keep you safe. I will be worthy of this gift." And Elena, exhausted and overwhelmed and filled with a love so intense it hurt, believed him. The first week was chaos. Luna cried constantly, her needs existing between human and vampire, requiring blood and milk in equal measure. Elena was exhausted, her body still healing from the supernatural birth. Every movement and effort. And Kieran was useless with the child, terrified of his own strength, afraid he would hurt her, convinced his very touch might taint her. "You won't," Elena insisted, placing Luna in his arms despite his protests. "You controlled yourself around me. You'll control yourself around her." He held the baby like she was made of glass, his expression one of helpless wonder mixed with pure terror. "She's so small, so fragile. What if I—" "You won't." Elena's voice was firm. "Look at her, Kieran. Really look." He did, his eyes tracing every perfect feature. Luna stared back at him with those impossible silver eyes, her tiny hand reaching up toward his face. When her fingers brushed his cheek, he froze. "She's not afraid of you," Elena said softly. "She should be." "Why? Because you're a monster?" Elena settled back against the pillows, wincing slightly. "She's half you, Kieran. Half monster, half human. And she's perfect, which means maybe you're more than you think you are. She'll grow." He said it like a prayer. "Will she?" He couldn't finish the question, his voice catching. "Be like you?" Elena touched Luna's tiny hand, marveling at the warmth of it, the life. "We don't know. Maybe she'll be human. Maybe immortal. Maybe something new entirely. Something the world has never seen. I want her to choose," Kieran said fiercely, his eyes blazing with sudden intensity. "When she's old enough, I want her to choose her own path, not have it forced on her. Not like—" He trailed off, but Elena understood. Not like his choice had been taken from him. Elena smiled. "That's very human of you." "You're changing me," he said quietly, wonder in his voice. "Good." Luna made a small sound, and Kieran looked down at her, his expression softening impossibly. All the hardness, the centuries of armor, melted away until there was just a father looking at his daughter with absolute devotion. "I will protect you," he whispered to the baby. "Both of you, with everything I am. I swear it. No harm will ever come to you while I exist. I will reshape the world itself if that's what it takes to keep you safe." Through the bond, Elena felt the absolute truth of his vow, felt the steel beneath the words, felt the love that had transformed him from monster to father, and she realized, finally, what she'd been afraid to acknowledge. She loved him, not because of the bond, not because of the magic or the ritual or the child, but because of who he was becoming, who he was choosing to be, the man who held his daughter like she was the most precious thing in all of existence, the man who let himself be changed, remade, softened by love he never thought he'd feel. "Kieran." He looked up, Luna cradled against his chest. "I'm not leaving." His breath caught, his eyes widening. "What?" "Our bargain was that I'd be free after the child was born, but I'm choosing to stay." She moved closer despite the ache in her body, reaching out to touch his face. Luna nestled between them, making soft baby sounds. "If you want me to." "Want you to?" His voice was hoarse, raw with emotion. He wasn't even trying to hide anymore. "Elena, He swallowed hard. "I love you. I've loved you since the night you walked into my throne room and offered your life without hesitation. Since you looked at me with those fearless eyes and demanded I make a deal. Since you showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. I just thought I didn't deserve to say it." "You didn't," she said honestly, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "But you do now." His free arm wrapped around her, pulling her close. They stood there, the three of them, in a castle that had known only death for centuries, and created something impossible, a family. 5 years later, Elena stood in the garden, watching Luna chase fireflies through the roses. The little girl moved with inhuman speed, her laughter ringing out like bells as she caught the light between her palms, then released it to flutter away. She'd grown into a beautiful child, her dark hair falling in waves, her silver eyes bright with curiosity and mischief. She was something new, something the world had never seen. Half mortal, half vampire, and entirely herself. She had her father's strength and her mother's heart. She could walk in shadow and sunlight both, the first of her kind to claim both worlds as her own. She was the bridge between worlds. "Mama," Luna called, waving. "Look, I caught 12. "That's wonderful, darling." Elena called back, her hand resting on her stomach, where another child grew. A boy this time, they thought. Another impossible miracle. Kieran appeared at Elena's side, slipping his hand into hers. His touch was still cold, but it was comfort now, familiar and beloved. "She's getting faster. She's amazing. Like her mother." He kissed her temple, his other hand joining hers on her stomach. "How are you feeling?" "Good. Tired, but good." She leaned into him. "This one is calmer than Luna was." Thank the gods for that. But his smile was warm, his eyes soft as he watched their daughter play. The village, Elena's village, thrived under Kieran's protection. The attacks had stopped the moment Luna was born, as if the child's very existence had rewritten ancient laws. Peace had settled over the land, tentative at first, but growing stronger with each passing year. The villagers had been wary of Kieran initially, but Luna had won them over. It was hard to fear a monster when his daughter brought them flowers and helped the children with their lessons. And Kieran had changed in ways Elena never could have imagined. He still carried darkness, still wielded power that could reshape nations, still commanded respect and fear from the creatures of the night. But he also read bedtime stories in silly voices, taught Luna to dance in the moonlight, smiled more in these 5 years than he had in 5 centuries, attended village festivals, and endured the children climbing on him like he was a tree. He'd opened the castle to the villagers who needed refuge, use his resources to improve their lives, become, in his own way, a protector rather than a predator. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked, the question she'd asked many times before, always needing to hear his answer. Choosing this life? He looked at her, then at their daughter, and his answer was immediate and certain. Never. Luna ran to them, throwing her arms around both their legs. "Papa, Mama, look what I caught." She opened her hands, and a firefly flew free, its light impossibly bright against the gathering darkness. Kieran scooped her up, settling her on his hip as she giggled. "Very impressive, little moon, but it's almost time for bed." "But, Papa..." "No buts." He booped her nose. "Your mother needs rest, and you need sleep. Even half vampires need sleep sometimes. Will you tell me a story?" Luna asked, her silver eyes wide and pleading. "Always." Elena watched them together, this ancient vampire and his daughter, and felt her heart swell. They walked back toward the castle together, Kieran carrying Luna, who was already yawning despite her protests. The bond hum between Elena and Kieran, warm and constant, a reminder of everything they'd built. In that moment, watching her daughter's joy, feeling her husband's love for the bond that still connected them, feeling new life growing inside her, Elena knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. They had taken an impossible bargain and created a miracle. They had turned darkness into light, and they had proven that even monsters could find redemption if someone, somewhere, was brave enough to see them as more than the blood they carried. Elena paused at the castle entrance, looking back at the garden, at the village lights in the distance, at the stars overhead that seemed to shine brighter here than anywhere else. This was home now, this impossible, beautiful, terrifying home, and she wouldn't trade it for anything.